Evan's voice cut through the airport noise as he stepped towards someone just ahead, and the sharp clap of a suitcase handle snapping upright made me stop. Marjorie stood by the row of metal chairs, her luggage lined up like she had been waiting all morning. Evan bent to hug her, his hand tapping her shoulder in that familiar way he claimed he only did with me. The air around them held a strange stillness, like the entire terminal paused just long enough for the truth to settle. I didn't say a word. I turned before either of them looked my way. My shoes scraped lightly against the floor as I headed for the exit, and every step burned. Evan called my name across the space, loud enough that people turned. I didn't look back. The automatic doors parted, cold air rushing in, the kind that bites at your skin even when the sun is out. He caught up outside, grabbing my arm like he could rewind the moment. I pulled away. He whispered that I was making a scene, that his mother was already here, that I should stop ruining things. The quiet around us felt heavier than his voice. There was nothing left to explain. He had chosen the one person he promised to set boundaries with, and he had done it behind my back. I walked away from him, from the trip, from the lie he tried to wrap in convenience. The parking lot felt wide and empty, but at least it was honest. Marjorie's laugh carried out from the terminal doors before they slid shut behind Evan. It had that clipped edge she used when she won something she shouldn't have fought for in the first place. The sound trailed after me across the sidewalk, thin but sharp enough to sting. Evan kept pace beside me, his breath tight, like he was holding back every word that might make him look worse. He asked why I couldn't handle a simple surprise. I told him a surprise doesn't come with a suitcase and a secret ticket. He lifted his hands in that tired gesture he used whenever he wanted to look innocent. He said his mother had been excited, that he didn't want to disappoint her. The way he said it made my stomach twist. He wasn't talking to me as a partner. He was talking to me like I was the problem he needed to manage. A car honked in the lane nearby and he flinched. His voice dropped lower. He told me I was being difficult, that people were staring, that I needed to get in the car so we could reset. I didn't move. His eyes darted back toward the entrance, as if checking whether Marjorie was watching. He stepped closer, lowering his voice even more, telling me to stop treating his family like they were the enemy. That line hit harder than he meant it to. I said nothing. I just stepped back, one slow step at a time, until the space between us felt real again. He looked at me like I had undone the entire day. I let the silence answer for me. A cart rolled past us, its wheels clicking against the pavement, and the rhythm cut straight through the thin calm Evan was trying to force. He stepped in front of me again, not blocking me outright, but close enough that I felt the pressure of it. He said we could talk later, that I was letting emotions snowball, that his mother didn't mean any harm. The way he framed it made my chest pulse with a slow, dull heat. It wasn't just the lie, it was the way he tried to fold the blame neatly and hand it to me. A couple pushing strollers slowed as they passed, glancing between us. Evan's jaw tensed. He hated being observed. He told me to lower my voice even though I hadn't said a word. I watched him run his hand through his hair, the way he always did when he was cornered. He mumbled that he had tried to tell me, that timing got messy, that I was reacting too fast for him to manage the moment. That phrasing stung. I wasn't a moment. I wasn't something he needed to choreograph. The automatic doors opened again, and Marjorie stepped out a few feet, pretending to adjust her bag. She wasn't subtle. Evan stiffened, then leaned in and said, I needed to stop making things bigger than they were. His voice had a quiet bite. He told me to show some grace. I let out a slow breath and told him grace isn't something you demand. His eyes flashed, but he didn't answer. I stepped around him and walked toward the far end of the curb. He didn't follow right away. A shuttle bus hissed as it pulled to a stop near the curb, and the sound sliced through the few feet of space I'd managed to put between us. Evan finally walked over, each step quick, clipped, like he was piecing together a version of himself he could still defend. He said we were wasting time, that the line for security would build, that this could all be smoothed out if I would just come back inside. His voice carried that thin layer of control he used when he wanted to sound reasonable without actually being honest. I stayed still. A gust lifted the hem of my jacket, brushing against my legs, grounding me in a way his words never could. He told me his mother felt hurt by my reaction. That word nearly made me laugh. Hurt. The woman who threatened to call the police if she couldn't tag along. The woman who copied my hair and called it my fault when the world didn't applaud. He rubbed his forehead. He said he didn't understand why I couldn't bend, why I had to turn every boundary into a wall. A car door slammed somewhere behind us, and he flinched again. He whispered that I was embarrassing him. He said it like I had dragged his mother into this, not the other way around. I asked him one thing, only one. Whether he had booked her ticket before or after the ultimatum, he swore he took back. He looked away. That silence told me everything. I told him we were done with the conversation, and I meant it in more ways than one. A baggage cart rattled over a metal grate nearby, the sound sharp enough to cut the last string of patience I'd been holding. Evan stepped closer again, lowering his voice like he was trying to hide the truth from the air itself. He said I was blowing this out of proportion, that it was just a seat, that his mother would have kept to herself. The way he framed it made the anger settle deeper, quieter. It wasn't about a seat. It was about the months I spent planning, saving, choosing places we both said we wanted to see. It was about trust that snapped the moment he saw her suitcase and didn't think twice. He reached for my hand, not gently. I pulled back. A small group rolled their bags past us. One woman slowed, pausing just long enough for her eyes to flick between us. Evan straightened, his smile tight and false, the kind people wear when they want the world to believe they're fine. As soon as she passed, the smile fell. He said he had tried to make everyone happy and I was punishing him for it. I told him choices have consequences. He laughed under his breath, a short, bitter sound. He said I was ruining everything. I asked him when everything had started meaning whatever makes his mother comfortable. He didn't answer. He couldn't. A shuttle horn blared somewhere down the lane, and for a second the noise felt like a line being drawn. I stepped back toward the sidewalk, letting the air stretch between us. He didn't close it this time. A luggage tag fluttered across the pavement, pushed by a thin sweep of wind, and I watched it skid right past Evan's shoe. He didn't notice. He was too busy pacing in a tight line, muttering that he shouldn't have to choose between me and his mother. Hearing him say it out loud pressed something sharp into my ribs. I hadn't asked him to choose. I had asked him to be honest. Those were never the same thing, though he treated them like they were. He stopped pacing and faced me, shoulders stiff, eyes a little too bright. He said he thought surprising me would reset the tension. The way he framed it made my jaw tighten. Reset. As if tension was something I created, not something he fed by letting his mother push every boundary I ever set. A van pulled up a few feet away, its door sliding open with a heavy thud. The sound made him wince again. He cared more about people hearing us than hearing me. I told him I needed space. He shook his head, stepping in closer. He lowered his voice and said I was behaving emotionally, that the trip was slipping away because I was holding on to some grudge. That word sat like a stone in my stomach. A grudge. Months of needling, copying, threatening, guilt-tripping, flattened into a single word so he could pretend this was simple. I took another step back. He didn't follow. He just stood there, breathing hard, as if waiting for me to fold. I didn't. A shuttle worker called out directions to a couple across the lane, and the words echoed just enough to break the brittle silence between us. Evan stepped forward again, softer this time, like he finally realized force wasn't working. He said he didn't want to fight, that he just wanted the day to go the way we'd planned. Hearing him say we almost made me laugh. Nothing about this day belonged to both of us anymore. Not after he rewrote it without telling me. He glanced back toward the terminal. Marjorie lingered near the doors, pretending to scroll through her phone while tilting it just enough to watch us through the corner of her eye. Evan noticed her too. He straightened, the way he always did when he felt her attention on him. His voice shifted again, firmer, colder. He told me I had put him in an impossible spot, that I had made things tense for no reason. His words came out flat, but the edge underneath them was unmistakable. A cab pulled up and idled a few feet away, the driver tapping the steering wheel, waiting for his next fare. The faint vibration of the engine ran through the pavement beneath my shoes, steady and grounding. I told Evan he had crossed a line long before we reached the airport. He exhaled hard and told me I needed to stop taking everything so personally. The sting of it settled deep, quiet but unforgiving. I looked at him then, not the way a partner looks, but the way someone finally sees the truth they've been trying not to name. His eyes flickered, as if he knew exactly what I was seeing. And still, he didn't take it back. A rolling suitcase clipped the edge of a curb somewhere behind us, the thud light but sharp enough to tilt the moment. Evan turned toward the sound, jaw tightening again, and when he faced me, something in his expression had shifted. He looked frustrated, cornered, but also calculating, as if he were sorting through which version of himself might still win this. He said he didn't understand why I had to react publicly, why I couldn't wait until we were on the plane or at the hotel or anywhere but here. The words landed heavy. He wasn't trying to understand me. He was trying to contain me. A family walked past with matching backpacks, the youngest child dragging a stuffed animal along the ground. The sight of something so simple, so unprotected, hit me in a way I didn't expect. It made the contrast between us feel wider. Evan rubbed the bridge of his nose and said he had already checked Marjorie in, that her boarding pass was handled, that undoing everything now would be a hassle. A hassle. The marriage he kept tugging at was reduced to logistics. Another driver honked in the pickup lane, making him flinch. He muttered that I always turn minor issues into storms. I told him storms don't come from clear skies. They come from ignored warnings. His eyes narrowed, a thin line of annoyance replacing whatever softness he'd tried a moment earlier. He said he was tired of being the middleman, tired of mediating between two women who refused to grow up. The words cut in a way I didn't show. I just stood there, letting the weight of it settle until even he felt the shift. For a moment, he looked uncertain, but not enough to apologize, not enough to try. A service cart beeped as it backed toward a loading zone, the sound stretching across the pavement in uneven bursts. The noise made Evan shift his weight, like he wanted to blame the whole moment on anything but his choices. He said we could reset if I stopped walking away, that travel stress gets to people, that I was taking things too literally. The way he softened his tone only made the words feel sharper. They weren't meant to comfort. They were meant to steer. I told him trust doesn't bend on command. He exhaled like I was being dramatic, then looked past me toward the crosswalk, checking again if anyone was listening. A breeze pulled at his shirt, catching the fabric just enough to expose the tension in his shoulders. He said he'd spent money on this, that tickets weren't refundable, that my reaction was making everything harder. I felt something inside me quiet at the way he framed it. Not the lie, not the secrecy, the cost. A man stepped out of a taxi behind us, dragging two oversized bags across the ground. One bag tipped and hit the pavement with a dull thud. The man apologized to no one in particular and kept walking. That small, careless moment made something in me settle. I didn't owe anyone an apology for protecting myself. Evan stepped closer, lowering his voice even further. He said his mother had been trying, that I never gave her a real chance, that walking out was immature. The word lingered in the air between us. Immature. I felt it land, cool and deliberate, meant to push me back into place. Instead, it clarified everything. A gust swept through the pickup lane, catching the edge of my sleeve as if nudging me to move. Evan didn't notice. He was too focused on arranging his next line, the one he hoped would tip the balance back in his favor. He said I should think about how hard his mother had worked to make peace, how showing up at the airport was her way of proving she wanted to bond. He said it like ambushing me with luggage was a love language. A teenager in a flight jacket brushed past us, earbuds in, eyes flicking toward Evan's raised hand. Evan noticed the glance and dropped his arm fast, pretending he hadn't been mid-lecture. He straightened his posture, smoothing his expression into something gentler, more presentable. He told me I was creating conflict where there didn't need to be any. The sentence sat between us, sterile and heavy, like a warning disguised as wisdom. I watched a plane arc across the sky far above the terminal roofline, its engines a soft rumble in the distance. I had imagined being on a plane today. I had imagined adventure, not explanations. Evan followed my gaze and said we could still salvage this if I stopped taking everything so personally. That line settled like cold steel beneath my ribs. He truly thought the problem was my sensitivity, not his deception. A rideshare car pulled up beside us, the back door swinging open with a muted click. For a moment, everything around us felt suspended, the noise, the movement, the rush of travelers all blurring past. Evan said my reaction was making him look bad, that I was being unreasonable, that normal couples don't implode over a simple misunderstanding. I didn't say a word. The misunderstanding wasn't mine. A taxi rolled over a patch of uneven pavement, the jolt sending a hollow clatter through the curbside lane. Evan shifted again, glancing at the sound like it gave him an excuse to reset his expression. When he looked back at me, his tone had changed. Lighter, almost coaxing. He said travel days make people overreact, that things always feel bigger when you're tired, that I should breathe and be rational. The softness in his voice didn't match the tightness in his jaw. I watched him choose his next words the way someone arranges pieces on a board. He said his mother had been excited, that she'd cried when he told her she could come, that he hadn't known how to tell her no after that. He didn't say when he told her. He didn't say why he hid it from me. He only said what made him sound trapped instead of accountable. A woman dragging a red suitcase paused near us, adjusting a loose strap before moving on. The momentary slowdown made Evan shift his weight, uncomfortable with being seen. He whispered that I was blowing this so far out of proportion, that I was acting like he'd done something unforgivable. The words settled in the air between us, cold and precise, acting, as if the hurt was theater. I told him trust doesn't break loudly. It breaks in the quiet, in the places where someone thinks you're not paying attention. His eyes flickered, and for a second I saw something. Recognition, maybe, but it faded fast. He said I was choosing pride over partnership. He said real marriages adapt. He said this wouldn't be a problem if I learned to compromise. A child ran past us chasing a rolling toy, its plastic wheels spinning across the concrete until it toppled. The small clatter felt truer than anything Evan had said. I stepped to the side, giving the moment room to breathe. He didn't follow. A rolling announcement echoed from inside the terminal, the kind that rises and falls without emotion, but somehow it cut straight through the space between us. Evan ran a hand down his face, the gesture slow and theatrical, like he wanted me to see how exhausted he was by all of this. He said he had tried to balance everything, that I was making that impossible, that he couldn't keep walking on eggshells. The irony landed so cleanly, I almost felt it hit the ground between us. I stayed still. Movement felt like giving him something he hadn't earned. A rideshare driver leaned against his car a few feet away, arms crossed, watching the stream of travelers flow past. Evan noticed the man's glance and stiffened again, lowering his voice until it thinned into a whisper. He asked why I always had to assume the worst. He said I had no proof he planned this behind my back. The sentence carried just enough careful phrasing to sound innocent to anyone who didn't know him. I did. I told him proof wasn't required when intent is already clear. His jaw tightened before he looked down, scuffing the toe of his shoe against the curb. He muttered that I was punishing him for trying to fix things with his mother, that I never considered how hard this was for him. A shuttle pulled up behind us, brakes hissing, and the sudden burst of air made the edge of my hair flutter across my cheek. I didn't brush it away. He said we could still go, the three of us, that he'd make sure she didn't overstep. The promise felt hollow. You can't set boundaries with someone you secretly invited into the moment meant for two. He kept talking, tossing out lines about understanding and compromise, each one duller than the last. I watched his expression shift as he realized nothing he said was landing. Nothing could. There are moments when someone loses access to the version of you they've always relied on. This was one of them. He knew it, and it showed. A gust rolled through the pickup zone again, pushing a strip of discarded paper across the concrete until it caught on a tire. Evan watched it for a moment, as if the tiny distraction could buy him enough time to rearrange the narrative. When he looked back at me, his expression had turned oddly hopeful, almost rehearsed. He said we could pretend this never happened, that we could reset the day, recheck our bags, meet his mother at the gate with a smile. The way he said it made my stomach hollow out. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for performance. A young woman with a neck pillow looped around her shoulders hurried past us, whispering into her phone. Her steps slowed when she heard Evan's tone, then quickened again, as if she didn't want to be too close to whatever was unraveling. Evan noticed her hesitation. His face flushed. He stepped closer, voice sharp in the way of someone who feels a spotlight they never wanted. He said I was humiliating him. I didn't answer. I let the words hang between us until even he could feel their weight. A delivery truck rumbled by, its engine low and steady, grounding the moment in something real. He said his mother deserved kindness, that I never made room for her, that this was my opportunity to prove I could be part of his family. The sentence dropped with a dull heaviness. It wasn't about a trip anymore. It was about compliance. A pair of airport staff walked by, chatting casually as they passed. Evan straightened again, plastering on a neutral expression until they were out of earshot. When they were gone, his voice dropped back into that brittle half-whisper. He said I had embarrassed him in front of strangers. I told him trust doesn't collapse in front of strangers. It collapses in front of someone you thought was on your side. He exhaled, long and frustrated, like I was the one rewriting the truth. For the first time since we arrived, he had nothing else to say. A child's suitcase toppled near the curb, the plastic wheels scraping loudly before a parent scooped it up. The brief clatter made Evan flinch, and when he looked at me again, the last trace of softness had drained from his face. He said I was being vindictive, that mature people don't storm off, that I should at least try to get along with his mother. Each word landed with the flat precision of someone who believed they were stating facts, not delivering blows. I felt something inside me shift, not anger, not sadness, just clarity. Marjorie appeared behind the glass doors again, tugging her handle upright, pretending to look around like she wasn't waiting for Evan to choose. Her eyes flicked toward me before she turned away, the gesture small but unmistakably smug. Evan didn't see it. Or maybe he did, and it didn't matter. He said I was making a scene, that this was exactly the kind of behavior that made his mother feel excluded. The way he said excluded made it sound like I had failed some test I never agreed to take. A shuttle worker passed between us, pushing a row of empty luggage carts, metal rattling as they bumped along. The sound filled the space for a moment, giving me room to breathe. When it faded, Evan stepped forward again, quieter now, but no less harsh. He said we had two choices: go inside and keep the peace, or go home and deal with the consequences. The sentence was meant to frighten me. Instead, it loosened something that had been clenched in my chest for months. I told him I wasn't choosing consequences. I was choosing myself. His face hardened, a quick flash of disbelief turning sharp. He asked if I was really willing to throw everything away over this. I didn't answer. Some truths don't need volume to be understood. I turned toward the far end of the curb, letting the noise of the airport swell behind me. Evan didn't follow, not this time. A rideshare driver stepped out of his car, stretching his arms before leaning back against the door. The motion drew a few eyes toward us, and Evan noticed. His spine straightened, his tone flattening into something careful, curated. He said I needed to stop walking, that we should de-escalate, that people were starting to stare. His voice carried a tightness that wasn't about me. It was about the audience he feared gathering. I kept my gaze on the crosswalk ahead, watching a woman hurry toward the terminal with a scarf trailing behind her. The fabric caught briefly on her suitcase before slipping free. That small moment of resistance felt familiar. Evan stepped closer. He asked what I expected him to do. Abandon his mother at the airport? Leave her standing alone with her bags? Each question came loaded with guilt, arranged neatly like lines he had practiced on the drive over. I told him I expected honesty. He looked away, jaw clenching, the muscle near his temple twitching. He said he had tried. Those were the words he chose. Tried. As if the lie came from effort instead of intention. A passenger nearby dropped a water bottle, the hollow thud rolling across the concrete until someone nudged it aside with their shoe. Evan glanced toward the noise, irritated, then turned back with a sigh that sounded rehearsed. He said communication goes both ways, that maybe if I were less rigid, he wouldn't feel the need to hide things to keep the peace. The sentence carved a clean, cold line down the center of everything I thought we were. He wasn't apologizing. He was explaining why deception was reasonable. A plane roared overhead, its shadow gliding across the pavement. The noise swallowed the next few seconds, leaving only the sight of Evan standing there, waiting for me to bend so he wouldn't have to. When the sound faded, I told him I was going home. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shake. I just said it. He blinked, stunned, not by the words, but by the calm. A gust pressed against the glass walls of the terminal, sending a faint vibration through the metal railing beside me. Evan took a half step forward as if the wind itself had signaled him. His voice tightened. He said going home wasn't an option, that it was childish, that I was letting emotions steer the wheel. The phrase landed with a dull heaviness. He wasn't trying to understand me. He was trying to manage me. A man rolled a cooler-shaped suitcase past us, the plastic wheels rasping over a crack in the pavement. The noise seemed to irritate Evan more than anything I'd said. He scrubbed a hand over his face and muttered that I was throwing a tantrum. I let the word sit in the air. He waited for it to sting, to pull me back into arguing. It didn't. I told him I was done discussing this here. His voice sharpened, rising just enough to make him flinch at his own volume. He lowered it quickly, glancing around again. He said I was ignoring the bigger picture, that trips like this don't happen often, that I was ruining a moment we'd planned. The we in his sentence felt hollow. If it had been we, I wouldn't be standing outside an airport having this conversation. A luggage cart clattered across the lane, pushed by an airport worker who didn't look our way. That simple indifference felt like a small mercy. Evan said his mother didn't deserve to be left behind. I asked why her feelings were the only ones he considered. His mouth opened, then closed, like he had run out of lines. For the first time since he'd seen his mother in the waiting area, he looked unsure, eyes flicking between me, the terminal, and the unraveling story he could no longer grip tight. I stepped back. The space between us felt like the truest thing in the moment. He didn't close it. A shuttle pulled up to the curb, brakes releasing with a long, tired sigh. The doors slid open and a handful of passengers stepped out, scattering into the flow of travelers. Evan watched them, jaw working, like he was searching for the right angle to hold this together. When he turned back to me, his eyes had that familiar shine, the one he used when he wanted to look wounded just enough to regain control. He said he felt blindsided that he had tried to do something meaningful for all of us, that I'd twisted it into betrayal. The words came out smooth, almost gentle, but underneath them sat the same quiet expectation. Fold, soften, return to the version of myself that made his life easier. A man dragging a pair of duffel bags brushed between us, muttering an apology as he passed. Evan stepped aside, then stepped right back into my space, as if reclaiming it mattered more than the conversation itself. He told me I was taking everything too personally. Again. The repetition made something in me cool rather than burn. I watched him scan my face, looking for the reaction he could argue with. It didn't come. A small group gathered by the crosswalk, chatting softly, casting occasional glances our way. Evan noticed them and forced his shoulders down, smoothing his expression into something patient. He asked if I wanted to salvage what's left of the day. The phrasing made it sound like I'd damaged it, not him. I told him I was going home. The sentence dropped cleanly, without rise or tremor. He blinked, stunned, then whispered that I was being unreasonable, that he had already checked the bags, that his mother was waiting, that I was embarrassing him. The order of priorities told me everything. A car door slammed somewhere behind us. Evan turned toward the sound, irritation flashing across his face. When he looked back, the mask had slipped just enough for me to see the truth. He hadn't expected me to follow through. He'd counted on the version of me who always compromised first. That version wasn't here anymore. A pair of teenagers hurried past us, one of them dragging a suitcase that wobbled on a loose wheel, the plastic tapping unevenly against the concrete. The rhythm cut straight through the standoff forming between us. Evan watched them for a moment, then looked back at me with a strained expression, half frustration, half disbelief. He said I was walking away from something good, that couples fight, that travel stress makes people say things. He said everything except the one thing that mattered. A breeze swept through the pickup zone, carrying the scent of exhaust and something sweet from a nearby kiosk. It brushed past my shoulders, cool and steady, grounding me while Evan tried again. He told me he had handled everything, that I didn't need to feel threatened, that his mother wouldn't interfere. The words came out too fast, too polished, like he was stacking them before they toppled. Marjorie stepped outside again, rolling her suitcase a few inches with exaggerated effort, pretending she wasn't eavesdropping. Evan straightened as soon as he saw her, his posture shifting automatically. He waved her back inside with a quick, stiff gesture, embarrassed by her presence, yet unwilling to admit why the moment felt so exposed. He said he didn't want to lose the trip, that he didn't want to disappoint her, that he didn't want to deal with the fallout. Every reason orbited around them, never touching me. Not once did he say he didn't want to lose us. A car edged up behind me, the driver leaning out his window to ask if I needed a ride. I shook my head. Evan glared at the man, then at me, like the entire world had conspired to make him look small. He said if I left, it would prove I didn't care about the marriage. I told him leaving wasn't the proof. Hiding things was. His mouth opened, then closed. For a moment, he looked like someone realizing a door had locked behind him, and he didn't have the key. I stepped toward the edge of the lane. He didn't move to stop me. A suitcase tumbled off a luggage cart near the curb, the thud echoing just enough to pull Evan's eyes away from me. He watched the airport worker lift it back into place, using the distraction to gather whatever argument he thought might still work. When he looked at me again, his expression carried a tight, defensive shine. He said I was abandoning him, that partners don't bail when things get complicated, that real commitment means sticking it out. The phrasing made my shoulders stiffen. Commitment wasn't the problem, deception was. I took a slow breath. A family passed behind us, the parents juggling backpacks while their teenage son rolled his suitcase with a bored drag. For a moment, the noise around us rose, voices blending, tires scraping, an announcement muffled through the glass. Evan lowered his voice even further, as if hiding the truth beneath volume might soften it. He said I was overreacting to a small misunderstanding, that he didn't have time to explain before the trip, that he thought I'd be happy once we took off. Happy. The word sat wrong. Happiness doesn't grow on top of secrets. Marjorie hovered behind the doorway again, this time pretending to check her boarding pass. She wasn't subtle. Evan saw her and hesitated, caught between managing me and reassuring her. That hesitation, not long, just a flicker, said more than his words ever could. I realized he wasn't choosing between us. He already had. A bus hissed as it pulled into the lane, releasing a wave of warm air that carried the faint scent of jet fuel. I felt it against my cheek as I told him I was going home. No raised voice, no drama, just truth. He stared at me like he didn't recognize the person standing in front of him. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he only recognized the version of me who stayed quiet. He said, "If you walk away, that's on you." I shook my head. Walking away wasn't on me. He had already pushed me there. A rolling cart clipped the corner of the curb, metal rattling in a way that made a few heads turn. Evan didn't notice. He was staring at me like I was the one rewriting the script, like the day had slipped into a version he couldn't control. He said we could still fix this, that if I calmed down, if I stopped making it bigger, we could get through security, meet his mother at the gate, and move forward. Every word stacked neatly on top of the last, forming the same quiet demand: comply. A woman in a denim jacket hurried by, tugging her scarf tighter as a cool gust swept across the pickup lane. The air pushed at my back. Steady and unyielding. Evan stepped closer, lowering his voice in that clipped way he used when he wanted to sound rational. He said I was choosing conflict over connection, that I pushed his mother away every chance I got, that he'd tried everything to keep peace between us. Peace. What he meant was silence. Mine. I asked him when he planned to tell me about the ticket. His gaze slid just slightly to the left. Barely a shift, but enough. That single flicker felt like the final unspoken confession. He opened his mouth, closed it again. A shuttle door slammed behind us, the sharp sound slicing clean through the pause. He said I was being dramatic. I told him I was being honest. Marjorie appeared again through the glass, taking one small step outside as if waiting for her cue. Evan looked at her, then at me. And something in his posture sagged, not with remorse, just frustration that the moment wasn't breaking the way he wanted. He said going home would create a mess. I said the mess already existed. He just didn't want to see it. A pickup truck pulled into the lane, the driver leaning on the horn impatiently. The noise surged around us, but inside the moment, everything felt strangely quiet. Evan stared at me, searching for the part of me that used to bend. It wasn't there. I stepped back toward the sidewalk. He didn't close the distance. A heavy bin door slammed somewhere near the departures entrance, the metallic echo running down the sidewalk like a warning shot. Evan flinched, then tried to recover, straightening his jacket as if posture could assemble a different version of reality. He glanced at the terminal doors again. Marjorie had stepped fully outside this time, her suitcase planted beside her like an anchor. She wasn't pretending anymore. She was waiting. Evan's shoulders lifted with a tight breath. He said he couldn't just leave her. She'd already checked in. She was counting on him. She'd never forgive being ditched. Every reason he gave orbited around her comfort, not our marriage. I let him finish, the silence between each sentence stretching longer, heavier, until he began to look uneasy. A woman pushing a stroller maneuvered around us, the wheels bumping over a crack in the pavement before she continued toward the doors. The interruption made Evan glance away, and when he looked back, his expression had sharpened. He said I needed to stop acting like a victim. The words came out low, deliberate, with a bite he didn't bother to hide. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. A truth that sharp reveals itself. He said walking out was petty, that adults don't abandon trips over personal hang-ups, that I was sabotaging us because I didn't like his mother. The accusation wasn't new, the coldness behind it was. A A gust of air pushed past us as a shuttle pulled into the curb, the warm exhaust mixing with the crisp outside air. For a moment, the smell wrapped around me like a reminder. There are places beyond this moment, beyond this argument, beyond a marriage that asks me to shrink. Evan stepped closer, voice tightening. He asked if I was really choosing to leave. He asked it like the answer wasn't already written in the space he'd created. I told him I was done, not with the trip, with the dynamic. His face stiffened, the realization landing hard enough to show. Marjorie called his name from behind him, sharp, impatient, expectant. He turned just slightly toward her voice, and that was the clearest answer he ever gave me. A breeze swept down the curb, catching the edge of my jacket and lifting it just enough to remind me I could still move, still choose. Evan didn't notice. He was turned halfway toward Marjorie now, her voice sharp through the airport noise, cutting across the lane like a cue he couldn't ignore. He called back to her without thinking, an automatic response, instinctive, revealing. When he turned to face me again, something in his eyes had shifted, not softness, not regret, just fear of losing control. He said I was forcing his hand, that I was putting him in an impossible position, that he couldn't be two people at once. The sentence fell between us like a confession he didn't mean to make. He wasn't torn, he just didn't like that I saw it. A group of travelers rolled their bags past us, wheels clicking over the concrete in uneven rhythm. One of them glanced at me, just a brief, curious look, but it was enough to make Evan adjust his posture again, pulling his shoulders back, smoothing his tone. He said we could talk in the car, away from all these people, away from the noise, away from anything that might make him look like the one at fault. I shook my head. He waited for an explanation I didn't owe him. A small dog barked from inside a carrier as its owner hurried toward the terminal. The sound hit me in a way I didn't expect, nudging a memory of Toby waiting at home, warm, steady, uncomplicated love. The contrast made my chest pull tight. Evan watched my face and mistook the shift for hesitation. He stepped closer, lowering his voice into something he thought sounded calm. He said if I walked away now, it would follow us forever. That marriages don't bounce back from moments like this, that I was choosing distance over healing. His words came out too polished, too practiced, like he was already preparing a version of the story he could use later. Behind him, Marjorie called his name again, sharper this time, laced with expectation rather than concern. He turned halfway toward her, torn only by obligation, not love. When he looked back at me, his eyes asked me to understand a dynamic he had never once tried to protect me from. I stepped farther back onto the sidewalk, letting the space widen, letting the truth settle where it wanted to land. He didn't reach for me. He didn't move at all. He just watched me step out of the moment he created. A horn blared from the rideshare lane, sharp enough to break whatever thin thread still connected us. Evan winced, then turned back to me with a face stretched between frustration and panic. He said we could go home together if that's what I needed, just not like this, not with people watching, not while his mother stood there confused. I looked past him at Marjorie. She wasn't confused. She was impatient. She tapped the handle of her suitcase like she was waiting for him to fall back in line. A young man jogged by us, dragging a carry-on that bounced with each step. The hollow thumps marked the seconds stretching between Evan's words and my silence. He said I was being unfair, that I had blindsided him, that he had meant well, meaning well had become his shield, polished smooth from overuse. Behind him, Marjorie called his name again, shorter this time, more command than concern. He spun halfway toward her, then stopped himself, torn between two audiences and belonging fully to neither. When he turned back to me, his voice dropped to a raw whisper. He said I was choosing humiliation over partnership. I told him honesty isn't humiliation, it's clarity. His eyes flashed, the truth hitting hard enough to show. A shuttle bus pulled up behind us, doors sliding open with a long, pneumatic sigh. The noise swept around us, carrying warm exhaust and the faint chatter of passengers stepping down. For a moment, the world moved on without us. Evan felt it. His posture tightened as if he were losing control of the scene. The storyline, the version of himself he wanted others to see. He said, "If I walked away now, I'd regret it. Not the marriage, the moment, the optics, the way it looked." That was the point he couldn't hide, no matter how soft he tried to make it sound. I stepped back. Not fast, not dramatic, just enough for him to understand the conversation was over. He reached out half an inch, then stopped, fingers curling at his side like he finally realized the gravity of what he'd done. I said I was going home. He didn't move. He didn't argue. He just watched the distance settle where the trust used to be. A rolling announcement echoed through the terminal doors behind us, the last syllable stretching as they slid shut again. The sound felt like a curtain lowering. Evan stood there with his shoulders tight, breathing hard through his nose, as if he could still force the moment back into a shape he recognized. For a second, he opened his mouth, maybe to bargain, maybe to redirect blame, but nothing came out. His eyes drifted toward Marjorie, who hovered a few steps behind him now, arms crossed, suitcase planted like she was guarding territory. She didn't call his name again. She didn't need to. Her presence did the talking. A taxi pulled forward, brakes squealing lightly as the driver leaned out and waved at me. I didn't move. I waited to see if Evan would. He didn't. He just stared, torn not between two people, but between expectation and responsibility. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded thin, stretched. He said, "If I walked out now, everything would fall apart." I told him everything had already fallen. He just hadn't looked down yet. A gust pushed through the lane, tugging at my hair, carrying the faint hum of engines and far-off boarding calls. The world felt bigger than the moment we were standing in, bigger than the airport, bigger than the lie. I took one slow step backward. Evan didn't blur. He didn't soften. He didn't come closer. His mother's shadow filled the distance he refused to cross. I turned toward the sidewalk. The air felt cold but honest. My footsteps landed steady against the concrete. Behind me, Evan called my name once, just once, but it held no reach, no promise, no truth. I didn't stop. A luggage cart clattered in the distance as I walked away, the sound fading behind me like a door closing gently instead of slamming. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Something had already ended in the space he refused to defend. When I finally stepped past the curb into the open lot, the quiet settled around me in a way that hurt and healed at the same time. And for the first time that day, I could breathe. If any part of this felt too close to your own experience, you can talk about it here.